Isaiah Grant was 40 years old on the Sunday afternoon. He was sitting in his home office upstairs, reading, when his wife's voice drifted up through the floor register below him. She was in the kitchen. He had come in from a morning run, gone upstairs to shower, and settled at his desk with a journal article when the floor vent carried her voice up with the particular clarity of old houses and quiet Sundays. She was talking about his funeral. She described the music she thought he would have wanted. She mentioned the house, what she would do with it, how soon she thought the market would move. She mentioned a man she called Curtis and told him, quietly, with the specific warmth of someone describing a plan long deferred, that they would finally be together once everything was settled. She said she had looked at his life insurance policy. She said she thought he had 6 months, maybe 8. Isaiah Grant had not told his wife that his follow-up appointment on the previous Thursday had come back completely clear. The elevated marker from a preliminary blood panel 3 weeks before had been a statistical anomaly, benign, resolved. A brief flag with no clinical consequence. He was in excellent health. She was planning a funeral for a man who was not dying. What she had no idea about was that the life insurance policy she had found, $500,000, was not the ceiling of what Isaiah Grant had built over 20 years, and that the pharmacy operation she had always called his little side work had been formally valued, at last independent appraisal, at $4,300,000. She had been planning to bury a man she had never once tried to understand the full depth of. What happened over the next 4 months would cost her everything she had been counting on. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. Isaiah Grant had opened his first pharmacy at 31 years old in a strip mall on Charlotte Pike in Nashville, in a space between a dry cleaner and a dental office, with 1 counter, 2 technicians, and a PharmD he had worked 8 years to earn. He had not opened it because he had capital. He had opened it because his grandmother, Eunice Grant, had spent the last 4 years of her life driving 40 minutes to a chain pharmacy that never had her medications ready and never had staff with time to answer her questions. She had died in 2010, and Isaiah had finished his degree the following year and opened the first Grant family pharmacy the year after that, in the neighborhood where she had lived. Because there was a need, and he was the one equipped to meet it. She had told him once. He was 12 years old, and she was explaining why she made her own bread instead of buying it. That the people who built things with precision were never the ones who had to beg for what they needed. Build the thing right, she had said, and the thing provides. He had carried that into every square foot of every location he had ever opened. There were 3 Grant family pharmacy locations in Nashville by 2022. The original on Charlotte Pike, a second in Madison opened in 2018, and a third in Antioch that had come online in 2021 during a period when large chains had been pulling out of underserved zip codes. He owned the commercial real estate beneath 2 of the 3 locations outright. His financial advisor, a careful man named Terrence Obie, had reviewed the consolidated business valuation the previous April and told Isaiah that the operation, including the owned properties and the wholesale pharmaceutical contracts, was worth $4,300,000. Isaiah drove an 8-year-old pickup. He kept a white coat in his office, not because anyone required it, but because it was the garment that had meant something to him the first time he put it on, and he saw no reason to perform a different version of himself. It was an old house they lived in, original registers in the floors, the kind that carried sound from room to room in a way guests always remarked on. Isaiah had always thought of it as one of the house's honest qualities. It didn't hide what happened inside it. Celeste had known he was a pharmacist from their first conversation. She had known about the Charlotte Pike location, and had visited it twice across 6 years of marriage. She had never asked what the business earned or what the property beneath it was worth. She had a way of categorizing things she did not intend to investigate, and the pharmacy had always been filed in a category that didn't require her attention. They had met in 2016 at a fundraising dinner for a Nashville children's hospital, where Celeste was representing the nonprofit she worked for. She was organized and warm, and she asked questions that felt genuinely curious rather than merely social, and he had driven home thinking she was someone who paid attention to what mattered. He had been right that she paid attention. He had been wrong about which things she had decided mattered. They married in 2018. For the first 2 years, it had the quality of something built deliberately. Then it became something else. The way things changed not all at once, but incrementally, until the structure looks different from inside than it did when you were first standing in it. Curtis's name appeared in October. A colleague from a conference, she said, delivered with the specific calibration of a name that had been rehearsed for the right degree of casualness. He noted it the way a pharmacist notes a new interaction flag, without alarm, with the understanding that he would need to return to it. He had a health scare in the fall. A routine blood panel produced a preliminary elevated marker. He told Celeste briefly, without drama, the way he discussed medical matters. She asked 2 questions and changed the subject. He had not yet told her the follow-up results were clear. On the Sunday afternoon, the floor vent carried his wife's voice up through the register. He understood he had taken longer to share good news than she had taken to build a plan around the bad. He sat upstairs for 23 minutes. He did not move from his chair. He did not go to the stairs. He did not make a sound. She had no idea that for every one of those 23 minutes, Isaiah had been 15 feet above her, completely still, listening. He took out his phone and opened his notes application and began writing down what he heard. Not everything. The sound was intermittent, and not every word came through clearly, but enough. He wrote down, once he's gone. He wrote down the house and the phrase 6 months, maybe 8. He wrote down the name Curtis. He noted the time, the date, and the duration. His face remained perfectly calm. He had spent 19 years learning the discipline of reading information completely before drawing any conclusion. In pharmacy, you did not act on a preliminary result. You verified it. You cross-referenced. You read the full chart before you touched the prescription. He had a preliminary result. Now, he needed the complete record. He opened his voice memo application. He pressed record. He set his phone near the floor register. He sat for 11 more minutes until Celeste's voice moved away from the kitchen and the conversation ended. He stopped the recording. He emailed the audio file to his personal account. He attached the typed notes with their timestamp and emailed those too. He moved with the same deliberate calm that defined all his actions when serious work was in front of him. He opened the patient portal on his phone and pulled up the appointment summary from Dr. Pierce, Thursday's clearance letter, received that afternoon and not yet shared with Celeste. He screenshotted it and sent that to the same email chain. Then he opened the joint account and examined 12 months of transactions with the attention he gave to any system he had been asked to assess. What he found was not dramatic. It was methodical, which was worse. $2,600 moved across 9 months to an external account in transfers small enough to read as ordinary household spending. 3 hotel charges at a property in Brentwood he had never visited with her. A charge at a legal document service in September. He searched it. The service specialized in estate planning support. He pulled up his life insurance beneficiary portal, logged in with his credentials. At the bottom of the activity log, a notation from October, policy information request from spouse. The log showed she had called to ask about payout process and standard claim review timeline. He sat at his desk for a while. Not with shock. Confirmation of what you have already understood is not shock. It is a kind of final stillness. He thought about the sequence she had assembled. A preliminary result. A phone call to the insurer. An external transfer account. A man named Curtis waiting on a timeline. He thought about what it said, not just about the months after the health scare, but about the months before it. A fault line does not appear in an earthquake. It was always there. The earthquake only makes it visible. He opened a new folder on his laptop. He named it Celeste. He placed into it the audio recording, the typed notes, the insurance inquiry log, the joint account statements, and one additional document, the beneficiary change confirmation he had submitted to the life insurance company 3 months prior, redirecting the primary beneficiary of the $500,000 policy from Celeste to his mother, Gloria Grant. After the preliminary results had made him think carefully about his estate for the first time. She had been planning around a policy that had already been redirected. He closed the laptop. He washed his face. He walked downstairs. Celeste was in the kitchen. She looked up and said she thought he'd been napping. He said he had been reading. He asked what she wanted for dinner. He called Nadine Cole's office from the driveway the following morning at 7:52 in the morning. Nadine Cole's practice on 12th Avenue South had been built on 2 things: financial precision in marital proceedings and the particular patience required when an opposing party believed they held a stronger position than they actually did. She met Isaiah at 9 in the morning with a yellow legal pad and the specific attention of a woman who had practiced for 23 years and was still listening as though this were the first case. He walked through everything. The recording, the notes with timestamps, the insurance inquiry log, the beneficiary change, the external transfers, the hotel charges, the clearance letter from Dr. Pierce. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. She called the insurance company before she called to ask how you were feeling, Nadine said. Yes, Nadine wrote something on her pad. The recording is admissible in Tennessee. One-party consent state. The insurance inquiry alone does not constitute fraud. She made an information request, not a claim. But in the context of the complete record, it establishes intent, timeline, and the gap between when she knew about the follow-up appointment and when she decided not to ask about the results. She looked at him. What does she know about the business? She knows I own a pharmacy. She has visited the Charlotte Pike location. She has never reviewed a financial statement. She believes the business is modest. Nadine looked at Terrence's business valuation. She looked at the property titles. She looked at the wholesale contract schedule. She looked at the total. Her settlement expectation, Nadine said, is built on a number that is roughly 1/10 of what exists. She said it the way a dosage is stated, without drama, because the number was simply what it was. She has been planning her next 10 years around a fraction of what you have built. She told him to have Terrence prepare a formal certified valuation with supporting documentation. She told him to obtain a signed clearance letter from Dr. Pierce, confirming the full clinical timeline, the date of the preliminary flag, the date of the follow-up, and the conclusion, so that the gap between her insurance call and the confirmed clearance was explicitly on the record. This timeline matters, Nadine said. She called the insurer on a Monday. Your follow-up had cleared you the previous Thursday. She may not have known. But she didn't ask. She called the insurance company instead of asking her husband how his appointment went. She paused. That is what the document establishes about what she intended. She told him to make no changes to the joint account, no changes to his routine, and no disclosure to Celeste that anything had changed. "Let her keep planning," Nadine said. "A plan built on wrong information collapses the moment the right information is introduced. We introduce it on our terms, not hers." Real preparation moved in quiet. Isaiah had always understood this. He drove from Nadine's office to his mother's house on Flat Rock Road, the house Gloria Grant had lived in for 34 years, and kept with the specific maintenance of a woman who understood that what you owned was what you took care of. She was at the kitchen table when he came in, and she read his face before he sat down. He told her everything. Gloria listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was still for a long moment. Then she poured him a glass of water, set it in front of him, and sat back. "She was planning to bury you," his mother said. "That is what I heard." Gloria looked at her hands, and then at her son. "Eunice always said you had her instinct," she said quietly, "for building things that lasted and building them right." She folded her hands on the table. "Don't let this woman's plan be the ending of what your grandmother saw in you. You finish it the right way." What followed over the next 3 weeks was methodical and complete. Nadine's investigator ran Curtis Wade through the standard background process. What came back added context, without adding surprise. Sales manager at a commercial lending firm in Nashville. Twice divorced. A civil judgment in Davidson County from 2021. A dispute with a former partner over jointly held property. Settled out of court. A pattern, visible in aggregate, of proximity to women navigating significant financial transitions. He had told Celeste what she needed to hear. He had been waiting on a timeline she had promised him. A timeline built around a death that was not coming. Terrence's formal certification came back in 10 days. $4,300,000 conservatively valued, with supporting documentation for all 3 locations, the owned commercial properties and the pharmaceutical wholesale contracts. Nadine filed a precautionary motion with the court preventing any change to marital assets pending proceeding. She included, with careful legal framing, the insurance inquiry log and the transfer records as supporting documentation. She also sent Celeste's attorney, Tillman, a preliminary disclosure letter outlining the basic financial picture of the marital estate. She had not been required to send it. She sent it because she understood what it would do to Tillman's preparation and to his conversations with his client in the 48 hours before the meeting. A person who had already had time to absorb part of the picture was far easier to work with than a person experiencing the whole thing entirely cold. In pharmacy, you counseled patients about what was coming before you handed them the prescription. You did not surprise people. Tillman called Nadine's office to propose a settlement conference within 4 days. Nadine told him she had a location in mind. Isaiah went home each evening and moved through the ordinary routine of his life with the care he gave to all precision work. He made dinner. He answered questions. He went to work. He came home. On the evening, Celeste watched him with the particular attention of a woman who was quietly assessing a timeline. He gave her nothing to read. In pharmacy, you never dispensed until the prescription was fully verified. You never acted on assumption. You read it twice, and then you acted on exactly what was written. Everything was verified. It was time to dispense. The settlement conference took place at Grant Family Pharmacy on Charlotte Pike at 10 in the morning on a Thursday. Nadine had proposed the location to Tillman, and Tillman had accepted. It was, by any measure, the right room. It was the place where Isaiah Grant had spent 19 years building what his wife had reduced to a payout amount in a plan she had made without ever walking through the door, with any real intention of understanding it. Celeste arrived through the patient entrance the way she always had on her rare visits. She was dressed deliberately, with the specific effort of someone who had decided not to appear to have made an effort. She had a composure about her that had clearly taken some preparation to construct. Isaiah met her at the pharmacy counter. In his white coat. In his building, Gloria Grant was seated on the bench along the wall, having arrived 20 minutes before, her purse on her lap. Her expression, the settled one of a woman who had been waiting for something to be said correctly and intended to be present when it was. Nadine stood at the counter with her folder. Tillman came in behind Celeste. Nadine opened the first document before Tillman had finished settling. Dr. Pierce's certified clearance letter went on the counter first. Signed, dated, attested by the clinic administrator. The date of the preliminary flag. The date of the follow-up. The clinical conclusion, no pathology identified, patient in excellent health, annual monitoring recommended as standard practice. The follow-up had been on a Thursday. The insurance inquiry call had been made the following Monday. Nadine placed the insurance inquiry log beside the clearance letter. Celeste looked at the clearance date. Then, at the inquiry date, she did not speak. The business valuation was the third document. $4,300,000. Terrence's signature. The property titles. The wholesale contract schedule. The full shape of what Grant Family Pharmacy was and had been for 19 years. The beneficiary change confirmation was the fourth document. The primary beneficiary of the $500,000 life insurance policy had been redirected to Gloria Grant 3 months prior to this meeting. The date of the change was printed clearly at the top. She had been making calls about a policy that was no longer hers to collect. Nadine set the last page down with the precision she brought to everything. "We are prepared to proceed to full discovery and formal court proceeding," she said. "Or we are prepared to discuss a resolution here that reflects the complete and accurate marital estate, which is substantially different from what your client's filing represents." She paused. "The clearance letter establishes that your client was in possession of a confirmed appointment date before the insurance inquiry was made." She did not ask about the results. The record establishes what she prioritized. Tillman had the expression of a lawyer who had not been given the full picture by his client and was now absorbing the actual picture with the quiet efficiency of a professional who understood that some corrections needed to be made quickly. Celeste looked at Isaiah. Her composure was still intact, but it was visibly maintained now rather than resting. "Isaiah," she said, and her voice was lower than it had been all morning. "I found the paperwork, and I was frightened, and I didn't know what to." Gloria Grant stood from the bench. "Celeste," she said, and the word carried nothing extra, no heat, no display, only the settled authority of a woman who had raised a son correctly and was not interested in a narrative that misrepresented that fact. "You found the paperwork, and the first number you looked up was the insurance payout. Not his doctor's phone number. The insurance company." She picked up her purse. "My son built everything in this building from nothing. The way his grandmother taught him to build things. He built it for the people in this neighborhood who needed it. And you never once asked what it was worth." She looked at Celeste one final time. "Talk to your attorney." Celeste was still. Isaiah looked at her the way he looked at a prescription written for the wrong patient, with clear and settled understanding of why it could not be filled. "Nadine will handle everything from here," he said. He walked through the dispensing area, where the light was clinical and constant and every medication was in its place, labeled, verified, documented, and true, and out through the staff exit into the parking lot. The Nashville air was cold and exact. He stood beside his truck for a moment. Then, he drove. 5 months had passed like a medication course running to its proper completion. Each day a precisely measured step toward the conclusion that had been determined before any of it began. Isaiah Grant lived now in a house in the Germantown neighborhood of Nashville. 2 stories of brick craftsman 3 blocks from the farmer's market, where he walked on Saturday mornings the way his grandmother had walked that market when it was different and smaller, and she had known every vendor by name. He had refinished the back porch himself over 3 weekends, because some things a man should do with his own hands to remember that he knows how. The settlement had been clean once the record was accurate and complete. Celeste had received her lawful portion of the shared marital assets, which were less than she had anticipated and determined by the actual documented picture, rather than the one she had built her plan around. The life insurance policy remained active. Its beneficiary was his mother. It had not been part of any settlement calculation. Celeste was in an apartment in Green Hills. She had left her nonprofit position in December under circumstances that Nadine described only as unrelated to the divorce proceedings. Isaiah had not sought more information than that. Curtis Wade had relocated to Knoxville by early spring. Whether he had told Celeste before he left or simply gone, Isaiah did not know. He had not pursued that thread. Grant Family Pharmacy had opened a 4th location in the Bordeaux neighborhood in February, in a zip code that had not had an independent pharmacy in 11 years. The Nashville scene had covered the opening as a community health story. Terrence had revised the portfolio valuation upward. Gloria had stood beside Isaiah for the photograph that ran with the article and had not said a word during the ribbon cutting, which was not like her. And when he asked her about it afterward, she said she had been thinking about Eunice and did not want to interrupt what Eunice would have been feeling. He understood that. There was a woman named Amara, a licensed clinical social worker who had reached out about a community health partnership between her family services organization and the Antioch location. Their first meeting was professional. Their second was less so. Their third was dinner at a restaurant she had chosen, and she had asked him questions that were genuinely curious rather than merely polite. And he had driven home thinking that he had believed this about someone before and had been wrong. He was more careful now about what he assumed attention meant. But he was watching. On a Sunday morning in March, he was in the back garden of the Germantown house, pressing seedlings into the bed he had cleared and amended through the winter. The light was the particular quality of early Nashville spring, tentative and warm at the same time, not yet certain about itself. He pressed one seedling in. Checked the depth. Moved to the next. His grandmother had told him, build the thing right, and the thing provides. He was free. He was solvent. He was unbothered. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.